This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and various different guests that roves through different areas of specialism each week. And this week, I'm rejoined by Tom Stimpson, who is what we call head of horticulture in my mail order business. But he's much more than that because, of course, that's his work, but his pleasure is gardening. And Tom invited me to his garden about 6 months ago, and it was just total blow away. And so that's why I really wanted Tom to come and talk about it. Welcome, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
So I'm just going to introduce the garden and then I'm going to hand over to you. So obviously I've been slightly dominating the airwaves over the last 2 minutes, but I'm then going to hand over to you. But I just want everyone to picture it, which is your garden is in Ely. And you can't quite see the cathedral from where you are, but you're very close. And I remember arriving the first time, and you sort of drive round the back of some 1950s houses, yeah? And you open the gate into Tom's back garden, and you are just in a different world. It's absolutely jam-packed with flowers and colour, and butterflies and bees and sunbirds, and it's just an absolute Eden. It's like a paradise with, to be honest, concrete around it, car parks, one or two less special gardens around it, if I can put it that way. But in Tom's, you just enter this amazing, exuberant, abundant, and totally beautiful world. And Tom lives there with his husband, Colin, and they together use it as their relaxation and their playground and their painting, really. So, Tom, will you tell us first how you found the house, the size of the garden, and just give us a little bit of a kind of visual picture of it and a little bit of history?
Sure, yes. Well, I've been in this house for around 20 years, and my prime reason for buying in the first place was because it's quite close to the river and quite close to the train station. So I had very quick access into London, which at that particular time I was commuting in quite regularly. And this house just was on the market, and it was very convenient and easy, central. It was about the right size at the time. So I put in an offer, it was accepted, and the rest is history, as it were. The rest
is history.
So when I moved in at that time, the garden was an absolute mess. It was the couple that had lived there prior to me had two enormous dogs, and the garden was pretty much trashed. It was just mud, and they'd kind of created a decking area, as they called it. I wouldn't have probably used the same expression, decking, but it was just crushed up pallets, and it was quite horrendous, really. But I could just see that I could do something with it. It was the right space for me at the time.
How big is it, the back garden?
So roughly 10 metres long by 7 metres wide. Mm-hmm. And within there, inside the garden, we've created sort of 3, I suppose, seasonal beds that are planted with various plants that sort of thrive and come to the fore at different times of the year. And then the garden is enclosed by a fence. The fence is quite old now, so it's faded to a lovely silvery grey colour, which I love. I hate people that paint fences. I really don't like any of that kind of stuff. But outside of the fence, we've also created 2 more borders. So what I call our kind of north-facing border, which runs along the sort of alley path that separates us from our neighbours. And then along the top of the garden, which is super sunny and right now is full of hollyhocks and lavender. It's really striking, and I can see the hollyhocks from when I'm sitting on the terrace as well. So it's small, but it's got lots and lots of elements.
Yeah, it has. And so it is small. I mean, and what I found amazing is it's small and yet you have zoned it. And so it's unbelievably visually rich. I mean, wherever you look, even though it's a small space, there's something incredible to look at. And I mean, obviously, I know that the basic structure around the edge, you've got roses and a trichospermum and a honeysuckle and some clematis. Will you maybe talk about what you've planted on the edges, and then we'll sort of creep in?
Yes, sure. Well, the back of the house, it has a lovely sunny aspect. And we planted a trichospermum there about 10 years ago. And it literally now has covered the entire back of the house. So from the floor up to the second story windows. And the sort of upper canopy sits just below those windows. So as of right now, although it's just starting to fade a little bit now, it is absolutely full of scented flowers. So the prime reason for planting that was because that's where we sit. If we're lucky enough to have lovely summer weather, sit outside for supper in the evening, have coffee outside at the weekend. So scent was the primary reason for planting that. But also it's evergreen. So it has a lovely structure all year round. Then working round the fence, it's a selection of roses and clematis. And I couldn't imagine a garden without clematis or roses. So I particularly love Clematis Forever Friends, which is just a white flowered variety, a group 3 type, and it just flowers forever. It's been in flower now for at least for 2 months, and it will go on right up into October. Fabulous. I love Clematis aromatica. I'm all about scent, and that one, the gorgeous little purple flowers with the very pronounced anthers and filaments, look just spectacular at the moment. So all of things like that ramble and climb over the fences. There's an exocorda there as well, which has its fling sort of early in the year, but it's full of roses, and we're forever adding. So it's a moving feast.
And off to on the left-hand fence, you've got that rose Francis E. Lester, haven't you?
Yes.
And I remember saying to you both, gosh, do you not find that a slightly transient flower? And either you or Colin said, yes, but the hips are just so great. So as soon as the flowers are gone, it doesn't matter, because then you've got the green hips, then they go to that lovely sort of greeny orange, and then they go orange into red. And so actually, yes, the flowers aren't so long lasting, but its show is a good 6 months, basically. That's what you explained to me.
Yeah, dead true. We saw that rose at Sissinghurst actually, and we saw it in several seasons. And even though I thought at the time, God, are we mad just having a rose that's not repeat? But precisely for what you said, the foliage is healthy, so it remains green all through, well, sort of from spring all through summer and well into autumn. The flowers are fantastic. They have a subtle fragrance. They're great for picking, and there's an abundance of them, as you say, for about 6 weeks. We also grow clematis through that. So as it starts to fade, then we have clematis flowers that pop up through it. And I think I might add a honeysuckle as well at some point as well to add some extra fragrance when the rose is gone. But then, yes, the hips are really striking.
Yeah.
Very, very striking.
And then if we come sort of the next layer in, I guess I know you've got a pear and you've got a couple of maples. So will you talk to us about those?
Yes. So I love acers. I particularly like the lighter leaf kinds. So the ones, and I've had them for a long time now. So we grow loads of things in pots. When you have a small garden, you have to have loads of pots.
We're coming on to those. Don't steal the show.
And so both of my acers are in pots. And again, they're quite, I think one is bordering on 12 years. The other one maybe even a little older than that. So the first one is Sangokaku, and that has the most brilliant, bright, golden coloured leaves and bright red stems. And obviously, as we get more pronounced to autumn, that colour radiates even more. That's a fantastic one. And it's quite controlled, brilliant for a small space. And then my other favourite is Osakazuki. And it's a lovely, very pronounced maple leaf, so quite big-leaved. A lovely green in the spring, starts to then colour up through summer, and then becomes the most glorious red in the autumn, like it's on fire. It's just fabulous. And it's in the top left-hand corner of the garden, so right from the sitting room, through the dining room, out through the doors, over the terrace. It stands out. It's just fantastic. And I underplant that with geranium roseanne to add a bit of perennial colour and a bit of trailing loveliness over the corner of the pots.
And you've got an amelanchier in a pot as well, haven't you, Tom?
Yep. You have to have an amelanchier. I think they're brilliant for small gardens.
Yeah.
And for big as well. And then I underplant that with an enemy blander for the spring. It provides a fantastic show, both the blue and the white. And in the summer, it's full of erigeron, Kovinskianus, which is at its height now. It's just frothing everywhere.
Yeah.
Just love it.
Yeah. So the next layer in, I think of as your topiary, and I know Colin is mainly in charge of that. But one of the things you and I talk about a lot is the problem with box moth, and are we safe to put box? And both you and us here at Perch have managed to keep our box with pheromone traps. So the next structure are these beautiful, very neatly clipped box shapes, including 2 or 3 pomegranates, which are sort of obviously spheres with little bits coming out the top. And then you've got slightly sort of crinkly, well-clipped edges to the main beds all the way through the garden. But again, remember, everyone, this is small, if not tiny. This is small, but edging the paths, it gives it this real feeling of structure, even in the winter. I haven't actually seen the garden in winter yet. I've only seen it from spring. But I can see that gives it a really beautiful bone and architecture. And I hope that we're not going to all end up having to take out our box, which I know Monty Don has in his garden on Gardener's World. But you're managing to contain it, aren't you, with the pheromone traps, Tom?
Yes, we are. And I think I couldn't imagine the garden without the box, because it sort of creates a bit of grandeur in a small space. And as you've said, it provides structure. So it's great in the winter because it's very obvious and it becomes a feature and a focal point. And we often drape outside lighting over it through the winter months, especially around Christmas time. It's brilliant for that. Also, when the bulbs start to come up in the beds, it's like a framework for those. And in the summer, it's just lovely. The lush green colour is brilliant. It provides, again, structure, but it's the colour, that rich green colour, especially once after it's late sort of spring prune and it starts to come back into a lush green foliage.
Yeah, that
great.
Wonderful spring green, isn't it?
But yes, we have managed to. So we use the pheromone traps, and we've been using some nematodes to try and keep it under control. And so far, it's working. So yes,
good. So around the edges, we've got the tractio, we've got the clematis, we've got the pear, we've got the rose, we've got So that encases and encloses it, and it is incredibly private. And then we've got the big architectural structures of these suitable trees to grow in pots that give a lovely light airiness and make it feel like a bit of the landscape. And then below that, we've got this really well-maintained and architectural and beautiful sculptural box. And then, in a true Vita Sattva West and Harold Nicholson way, everything frothes from the beds. And this is a small garden, but it still froths out. And all the way down the more shady bed, it's frothy. And then the top right-hand corner is filled with froth. So tell us about the froth, Tom.
Well, I think that's really important. I love exuberance, and just because it's a small space, I want it to appear bigger than it actually is. And I sometimes think, like inside with interiors, very often having oversized bits and pieces creates a sense of even more space than is actually there. So I love borders that are full of everything. So in the spring, loads of narcissi, not just a few, loads, followed by alliums, then foxgloves, geums, geraniums, and then as we get into summer, dahlias, salvias, gaura, cosmos, things that provide height, that bush and spread and provide lots of colour. Got to have lots of colour.
Yeah. And so all that, they're perennial bulbs. They're biennials, which obviously replaces seedlings every year because you don't have a greenhouse, so everything has to be grown or bought in, and that you have a complete succession, don't you? I mean, I've never been there when there was a downtime, and so by first of all having your narcissi, then moving on to alliums and foxgloves, and then having perennial geraniums. And and you have a few geums in there too, don't you?
Yep.
Honesty as well. I remember seeing that, and a hesperis, so more biennials. And then with your dahlias and your cosmos, it takes you right through to the first frost, and then you've got your box. So the succession, and it's a small space, is brilliantly done. But I suppose the absolute sort of peak of your garden, as you've already said, is provided by the containers, and you cram every chink and cranny. Again, we're going back to Vita Sattva West, a phrase she always used, cram every chink and cranny. So your tables are full of pots. Your path edges have got pots. Your terrace is there's a lovely rosemary bush right by the kitchen door. But apart from that, everything is pots. So pots. Tell us about what's there at the moment and what you're thinking about for the autumn planting for next spring.
I suppose right now I've got pots full of pelargoniums, and they're one of my absolute favourite summer flowering plants. I couldn't be without pelargoniums in all their various forms and guises. So I've got lots of those. So I use terracotta a lot because I think for pelargoniums, because the terracotta is so porous, it just works so brilliantly for those. I love the scented leaf types. I have quite a few of those, and I love them near the door, so I can brush past them and just feel the leaves all the time and get the fragrance. And pots, more fragrance in pots, so things like chocolate cosmos, heliotrope reva, mixed in with gaura, more pelargoniums. Even this year I've put an actea in the centre as well, which is now about to come into flower, again to provide more fragrance. So there's lots of that.
Nemesias as well. You've got that lovely Wisley vanilla, which is so fragrant, haven't you?
And it's still going strong now. It's still very, very good. And all of those are displayed in various corners and in the centre of the garden. So you have to walk around everything, even though it's a small space. You can't see everything all in one go.
Yeah.
You still have to walk out and look around. So I group pots around the trees in the centre, all the corners. There's probably slightly too many on the terrace, actually. It's a little bit of a job to sit down, but I don't care. It's absolutely fabulous, and I wouldn't change it at all.
It truly is fabulous. It truly is. And bulbs-wise, you're into the species tulips at the moment, aren't you, Tom?
I love them. So, a particular favourite of mine, and I've grown it every year for years, is Sylvestris. I grow it for its fragrance. It's bright yellow colour. And what I've been doing over the years is now, once they finish flowering in the pots, I just move them out into one of the beds. So I'm now building up on as you walk outside the garden and walk up to our garage and parking area in the spring, that's starting now to become almost, I call it the North Border sort of walk, but it could become the Sylvestris walk in the spring because there's more and more starting to spill out.
And hyacinths you've got there too. I remember from March and April, my visiting, you've got lots of the lovely pure white hyacinth, which works so well in shady border.
Yes, you need white, don't you, to make everything zing and sing a little bit. So yes, I love, and some of the more recent finds of our species tulips, like Nora, Danique, have just been spectacular in pots this spring. I'm so looking forward to growing a lot more of those.
Yeah, good. So before we finish with the back garden, just remind me, how many meters by how many meters?
10 meters long, 7 meters wide.
Okay, so for me, and I don't know about you, I reckon that adds up to about 5 strides one way and
Big
perhaps
strides, yeah.
11, 12 strides the other way. And so that's to get it in your heads that this is a little patch, and it's just exquisite. And before we finish, and I'm going to get Tom to come back regularly and take us seasonally through the garden, but this is a kind of overview of this exquisite paradise town garden. Take us into the front, Tom, and talk about the window box and your doorstep and the few things that you have out there. It's quite a busy road. It's quite a busy pavement, so you can't have too much, but just talk us through that.
So yes, at the front of the house goes straight onto the pavement. It's quite a wide pavement. We're quite lucky with that. So we can, there's a little bit of extra space to group some more pots. But I suppose the window box runs the full length of our sash window at the front. Mm. And I think really that's really important because it's the one bit of colour we can have at our sort of the front of the house, really.
Yeah.
It's quite long. I think it's about 1.2 meters long, the window box. And in the spring, again, it's full of narcissi and species tulips. There's generally some violas in there as well. And in the summer, right now, it's full of chocolate cosmos, gaura, verbena rigida, verbena homestead purple that's sort of spilling out over the front. Mm. Also spilling out over the front is Pelargonium attar of roses, and some Erigeron, Kovinskiana's profusion, is spilling out and winding its way through all of it. And it looks really lovely. It looks really full. And looking from the inside out, I get the lovely shadowy effect of that comes into the house as well. So we look at it sort of in a slightly blurry way, looking from the inside out.
Yes, it's beautiful. So Tom's garden, because it is onto this quite busy road, is sandblasted. So it's through this haze. You see the verbena just moving and the gaura moving beautifully when you're sitting having a meal in their house. You look out and it feels, again, rather like you're in paradise. You're on a cloud and it's a wavy cloud of gaura and verbena, and it works unbelievably well. And in that baking dry, potentially, I suppose, slightly polluted with cars going past doorstep, you've got lots of salvias, which of course are incredibly robust and incredibly good for pollinators and unbelievably long flowering. And so they kind of do their thing on your doorstep, don't they?
Absolutely. And as you say, there's a cluster of salvia pots and another quite big cluster. And this weekend I only added to it even more. I moved some of the pelargoniums from the back garden round to the side and the front, so they sort of mingle and spill out over the front doorstep, which is lovely. And it's very warm and sunny in the morning there. The sun rises at the front of the house and gradually works its way round. So for the best part of up until around sort of 1:30, it's very sunny at the front. So all the sun lovers love it. They thrive.
And it's really important also to mention that from this pint pot size garden, and that's what I'm going to start calling Tom's garden, is the pint pot garden, because that's what it feels like. It feels like it's just spilling over in the most wonderful way. And from it, Tom always picks things to bring inside. So just talk us through your sort of favourite things, because whenever you walk into Tom's, again, it's a sort of 2 up, 2 down. It's not a sort of massive rolling house or rolling acres, but every surface has got one sprig of something, or, talk us through what you love to pick and bring inside and how to do it.
Well, I suppose in spring, it's all about bulbs. So I'll either bring little pots of scented narcissi or species tulips inside, so they can not only have their moments of glory outside, but just even if it's just for 2 or 3 days, bring them inside for a bit of seasonal colour. I also love picking the scented narcissi. So I always grow far too many because I know some of the pots are going to get hammered because I want them to come inside. And I love the scent of them. Really important. And then as we sort of merge through sort of into late spring, early summer, I love being able to go out and pick foxgloves. Geums are wonderful for picking. They last for ages. And then, of course, we move on to alliums. And although you can get a bit of an oniony smell, obviously, I still love them. They're brilliant for a huge, great big vase of froth in the sitting room. I love those. And then as we move through into summer, I have a little patch closer to the house, which is generally a bit more for cutting. So right now I've got things like scabious black cat in there, a load of cosmos.
Yeah.
So they all get picked.
And they're all cut inside. And come again. Yeah.
And then, of course, the dahlias. I've got quite a lot of dahlias in pots and in the bed. So right now I've got pots full of rhubarb and custard and strawberry bonbon that are sort of spilling out of my vases, which they look wonderful. And they're lasting really well in the vase. They're doing really well. So
yeah, the Colorette series. Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. I mean, that gives us all a really good taster. So Tom is now in charge of, we call it the Tom's Town Garden range, but I'm going to change it to Tom's Pint Pot Garden because that, I think, describes it better, really. But yeah, Tom is going to steer with me looking over his shoulder to have a whole range of things that are really suited to small city or town spaces with exuberance, colour, cut flower and abundance at its very core. So I'm extremely excited about it. I know Tom is, and I hope you all are too. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much for listening to Grow Cook Eat Arrange with me, Sarah Raven, and Tom Stimpson, the Pint Pot Gardener. And next week, I'm joined by Hazel Gardner, so another gardener, but that's her surname rather than her trade, although it is her trade actually as well. She's in fact a wonderful florist who does amazing event installations and a wonderful gardener. And I'm going to chat to her about her own garden and the projects that she's working on. She's on the telly and she's a broadcaster. She's an ex-fashion person, but most of all, she's a gardener and a florist and she loves it. So join me and Hazel next week. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.